Ex-Genesis guitarist Anthony Phillips opens up about stage fright. He had it pretty bad at one point. I'm John Beaudin from Rock History Music. It's something serious that a lot of rockers deal with, stage fright. A little of it is normal, and it actually can help the show. It creates that adrenaline drive, but a lot of people have had to deal with it on a very serious level. Carly Simon was very open about her stage fright, Eddie Van Halen, Donny Osmond even. In 1982, Andy Partridge, the lead singer of XTC, had a meltdown while doing a concert in Paris. He called it a nervous breakdown on stage. When it comes to the first two Genesis albums, the first album was a good, more or less experience for Anthony Phillips as a guitarist. By the time the second album came out, he contracted glandular fever. And if you look up anxiety of any kind and glandular fever online, a lot of folks are making the connection. Ultimately, Anthony Phillips does not know if that's what it was, but he surely looked into it. We talk about stage fright with Anthony Phillips.
It was curious, really, because I wasn't. I was, a sort of a person who had degrees of anxiety, but I wasn't per se a kind of very anxious. But I was quite knockabout. But I had my sensitive side, and I was fine to start with. I mean, actually, Peter was the one that was more nervous. He was very shy as a person, and therefore, putting his personality on stage was difficult. And he only really began to kind of develop things when he assumed a role, an act, which partly came from having to make up stories whilst we were tuning our 12 strings, which spent hours. But I was fine to start with. I mean, I was a little bit nervous, but there was no sort of stage, no gnawing kind of terror. But I'd had glandular fever before. A little while before we went on the road, and since leaving, not an awful lot was. I knew nobody that had it at the time, and I didn't really talk to many people about it afterwards. But over the years, I have come across a few people that have had it. A very close friend of mine's wife had it and was very ill for quite a while and lacking in energy. And I did find out, which was an interesting one, that apparently it can affect your nervous system. A girl I was going out with, her brother had glandular fever, and apparently he was a hockey goalkeeper, and apparently kind of lost his nerve. And I wonder to this day whether it was the fact that I'd had this, because glandular fever was the illest I'd ever been, actually, just before my exams in the summer of '69, only a couple of months before we went on the road. So I've often wondered if there was a sort of physical connection, because I kept getting I was ill all the time, you see, because you're not supposed to, a year after glandular fever, 18 months, you're supposed to go very carefully because it's in your system. And so I was getting colds all the time, and because we were living everyone probably would imagine that Genesis middle class boys, had all the more cons, but we didn't. We were in the back of a drafty bread van up and down the country, sleeping on people's floors, and there was no hotels and stuff. So I've often wondered whether the sort of terror that suddenly struck me was actually something to do with the effects of the glandular fever still in my system, because I was not naturally. I mean, I loved being in bands at school. I loved getting up on stage. It didn't. There was a little free throw of nervousness, but you need that. But as I've always tried to explain to people, there's a world of difference between a little bit of nervousness and when you suddenly get that. That feeling of I can't remember my lines. I mean, I wish I'd talked to actors. I've come across actors since who've described exactly the same thing. You suddenly get this thing where you think, I can't remember how that song goes, and you watch your fingers doing it, and you think, I don't know how I'm doing that, and it's really terrifying. You go ice cold, and it was sort of every night this would be the same thing. I think tonight I'm going to forget, tonight I'm going to lose it. And I was so frightened that I couldn't talk to the others about it, because you think you're going mad. If you haven't read about it or talked to people about it, I now realise it's a very common thing on stage with actors, and some of the best actors, the greatest, have suffered from it. It just suddenly hits you out of the blue. I wasn't able to talk to the others about it because I was too frightened, and so I sort of battled on with this thing for ages and ages, and sort of autopilot kind of got me through, really, but it was absolutely sheer terror almost every night. Ironically, if things went wrong, if something went wrong on stage, if there was a distraction, then I started to feel better. But when there was pressure, like we had to do these gigs where all the agents were coming and the record companies, I just used to completely shit it, because I used to think, oh God, I'm going to screw it up tonight, and this is going to be it for the band, we won't get signed. And it was pressure. And you know, I was a kid of 18, and it was all too much, to be honest. But yeah, the link with glandular fever we'll never really know, but it was classic sort of stage fright, as in what actors get. You know, just came up and crept out of me from nowhere.
Anthony Phillips has just re-released a deluxe package 2 CD set of his pop album Invisible Men, and you can pick it up right now. We'll have more of our chat with Anthony Phillips, ex-guitarist for Genesis, and now a multi-instrumentalist, coming up next Sunday. Make sure you comment on our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. I'm John Beaudin from Rock History Music.